Hello, this is Adam Graham, and this is the start of something we're trying out here on YouTube. We're going to go ahead and be bringing you some longer form sort of compilation videos from our archives, and these will contain, once we get fully started, essentially a week's worth of programs. Now, for the podcast, I have a series that I'm doing with Volume 1, and now we are releasing Volume 2. And these essentially collect the first 3 and second 3 seasons of the podcast. So we're going to be going with the earliest available episodes, and I've been recording season commentaries for each season of The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. So for this very first Volume 1 compilation, we will be playing the Season 1 commentary, and then the very first pilot episode of the program with edited opening commentary so that you can actually hear the episode. And this, like all of the episodes that we're going to do for this Volume 1, will be a premiere, and so it'll be kind of like a radio broadcast when it's playing, but obviously people can go back and listen to the whole thing later. And we're going to just kind of try it out, see how effective it is, if it helps the channel to grow, if it's something that's going to get new listeners, or if get significant interest, we'll continue to do them. If not, well, at least we're trying this out. So I hope you enjoy it. And now here is the Season 1 commentary that I recorded. Take a listen and enjoy. Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio commentary from Boise, Idaho. This is your host, Adam Graham. In this episode, we're going to talk about Season 1 of the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio, the creative decisions made, and we're also going to present the unedited commentary from our pilot episode. We cut down the commentary on that episode, and you're going to find out why, because it's really long and rambling. Now, I do want to be clear from the outset. This episode is commentary. There is not going to be a story or a radio drama included. If you're like, I do not want to hear about the history of this podcast, then skip this episode. Grab another one. And if you go on iTunes and leave a commentary that says all I do is talk and that there are no programs, I will come up to you on the street and just ask you why. I won't actually give any context. I won't introduce myself, but I will find you and I will say why. Because I was very clear. This is not typical. All of the other episodes that are in Season 1 have got commentary, and they've got episodes. So don't go and write some review in the iTunes store. That's all I'm saying. And no, I won't actually go and find you. You have to clarify these things these days. And yes, I know it's called the Apple Podcast Store, but I've been doing this so long that it is really hard to get out of that habit. Alright, so if you're interested in the behind-the-scenes stuff, then, continue to listen. If you're not, go download another episode. We've got hundreds. Alright, so we're going to start with the basic story of the podcast, and then we'll play the whole unedited commentary. We go ahead and we go to 2009. I've been doing a podcast for more than 2 years of old-time radio programs. I started in March 2007. With the Old Time Dragnet show. Then in January 2008, I added the Old Time Radio Superman show. And I could go into a lot of reasons for Dragnet and Superman. I've talked about both elsewhere, so I won't. But I had begun to receive suggestions of doing other programs, particularly in the detective genre. Big problem I saw when I got a suggestion is in most cases the show was really obscure to the general public. Dragnet, I thought at the time, had a pretty well-known brand, though I think it continues to be a little less known when you get into some of the millennials and younger generations. So not only were these shows unknown, but most of them just did not have the same number of episodes of Dragnet. Dragnet had 300 episodes. The old-time radio Superman show had more than 1,000 episodes. And I guess that was a big problem. If I did a series that, say, has 50 episodes in it, and I make that my sole podcast, and I work on that, I build up the audience, and then after 50 episodes, the podcast is over. I saw that as a problem. In retrospect, it's probably not insurmountable. But I did not relish the idea of having to start a fresh slate for podcast over and over again. However, something started to happen that was going to be key to this whole Great Detectives of Old-Time Radio podcast starting up. And that is that I began to really fall back in love with detective stories. And much of that is due to online radio stations, and in particular the series Let George Do It. I'd grown up on television programs like Matlock and Columbo. I absolutely adored so many mysteries, diagnosis, murder. But I fell in love. I got married. My wife and I shared a love of science fiction. She did not care too much for mysteries. And so I stopped really following them as much. But in my mid to late 20s, I really started, with some of these old-time radio detective stories to remember, I really love a detective going out and solving a mystery. I really enjoy hearing guys like George Valentine and Barry Craig. And I got the initial idea for the Great Detectives of Old-Time Radio from one of the online radio stations. The way they would choose what detective program they were going to play on a given day is they would go ahead and go by date. They would say, okay, today is May the 12th. Here's a radio program that aired May the 12th. And so it would vary what program you got, what year the episode was from. I think it was fine for just playing a sampler, but I just had the idea, it would be great to hear an entire series from start to finish. And that gave me the initial idea for the Great Detectives of Old-Time Radio. It would be a Monday through Friday program, and every day we would play an episode of a detective program. However, it would be the same detective program, and we would play through every single episode and then switch to another. My initial plan was for us to play every episode of Pat Novak for Hire and then play something else. And I actually recorded the entire Pat Novak for Hire series in advance, until it occurred to me that this idea was not actually good in its initial form. You play through every episode of a series, then switch to another series. I really got the sense that people who like Pat Novak for Hire might not necessarily like Sherlock Holmes and vice versa. There was a question, how are you going to have a consistent audience or have an audience with a wide variety of people and mystery lovers in it if you go ahead and you play mystery series that just don't appeal to everyone and that's all you play? It was going to be very difficult. And then I came up with the idea of taking 5 different detective programs and playing one per week, Monday through Friday. I should note that I did tell Andrew Rhines, who had come on, I think it was 2008, 2000, may have been even earlier in 2009, that he had volunteered to do sound editing on the Old Time Dragnet show. greatly improved the quality of the program. He again volunteered to come on Great Detectives. I didn't ask him not because I, wouldn't have appreciated the help, but because I felt very uncomfortable asking because I did not expect any particular large amount of revenue in the first year of the program, and I did not want to ask that amount of work. But Andrew volunteered for it, which greatly helped the program. He also provided the initial theme, which was a bit of pod-safe music that kind of played off of the Simpsons theme. We kept that for about the first 10 episodes, and then we switched to different versions of our ongoing theme, which was a bit of Shostakovich, which was provided on an Armed Forces Radio Services version of Pat Novak for Hire. And that's Symphony 1, Opus 10. And now we're going to turn to the initial introduction that I provided to the podcast at the start of our pilot episode. This was what is commonly known as a mistake. It goes on entirely too long. And immediately afterwards, there was constructive criticism in a review on Apple Podcasts, which I did take to heart and worked on, and I'll talk a little bit about that after we actually listened to the full commentary. Then I did end up posting my back catalog on YouTube in 2017. And the episode actually just got overwhelmed with negative remarks. With folks, picking apart how long it was. And as I said, it was definitely too long. And, it was one of those things I had to shut off the comments because I just did not need the daily reminder of something that happened, 8 years ago that I, would have done differently. I only edited this before we did the, started work on our Volume 1 set. Most of the other commentaries, with all their flaws, remain intact, so you can kind of hear my development. But I did not want to start off this set with something that would, turn people off or cause any problems, so we shortened that down. Obviously, it is still a little bit long-winded and, stumbling, and if that's a concern, you may want to listen to the more recent episodes as I've gotten better. This is kind of a look at how I developed as a host and the programs that we played in those early seasons. I'm not, trying to erase the original commentary, so we're going to go ahead and play it here, and I will kind of talk about it afterwards. So let's go ahead and take a listen. Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. This is kind of our preview episode, and we're going to talk about what the show's about. We're doing this particular episode for a couple reasons. One's just to give a brief introduction, and then the other thing is just to allow people to subscribe to the show if they like the concept. If they're going to want to follow the show, then they'll be able to download the episode, subscribe to it on iTunes. The show itself will start in 2 weeks, October 26th. October 26th will be the start of the actual show's launch. And what we're going to do on the show is this show will feature detectives of all sorts. We'll have hard-boiled, soft-boiled. If there's a title of midway-boiled detectives, we'll have that as well. We'll have commentary before and after. I don't claim to be Edwin R. Murrow or great voice of radio, but just kind of to talk and to add a little insight and perhaps a little humor to these great shows. What's going to make this different is we are actually going to follow each series that we do from start to finish
in terms of available episodes. So what that'll mean is we will go ahead and we'll start. I'll go ahead and give you the lineup on shows. Monday will be Box 13 with Alan Ladd. Tuesday, Pat Novak for Hire with Jack Webb. Wednesday, Let George Do It with Bob Bailey. Thursday, Sherlock Holmes, a wide variety of actors stepping into that role. And Friday will be yours truly, Johnny Dollar, with several actors. And we'll basically follow that from start to finish, because I think that there's a couple things. I like to follow a series from beginning to end, because the series will change over time. I don't know, there are a lot of great shows that just show episodes at random. That's fine for them, but I like to go through a series from start to finish, and we'll do that. And when we get through one series, we'll go ahead and we'll switch to another. We can continue to switch out series as long as we've got the desire, energy, and passion to do so. Now we won't show just any mystery story. It's going to be based on a very objective standard. It's going to be based on the shows I like. Okay, maybe that's a subjective standard. But I'm going to listen to these shows and comment on these shows. And if I have fun doing them and listening to them, then I'm going to have fun bringing them to you. And I think that's going to be good for everybody. So we don't have a whole schedule of shows worked out, but we will go ahead and we'll go ahead and work at, in terms of what's for the future. And we'll just kind of play it by ear. You got any comments, or if you want to suggest a show for the future, email me at box13@greatdetectives.net. And greatdetectives.net is where you can sign up to subscribe and to learn more about upcoming episodes of the show. So I encourage you to do that. However, there are some times when, say, we'll be through the series where we'll show a mystery special. Mystery special. It won't be, say, from an anthology show, usually. There's one exception that comes to mind, like Suspense or The Whistler. Because to me, I think that good detective shows are driven by a good detective, somebody we can cheer for at the center of the story. And most of the time, the anthology shows don't have that going on. However, as I don't want to begin any of our series today, and I really want to just wait that 2 weeks, we're going to begin with an episode of the Screen Actors Playhouse. If we're going to show a special, it's generally going to be from Lux Radio Theater or Screen Actors Playhouse or Screen Directors Playhouse, and because they really, truly featured some of the best stories. In fact, they sound quite familiar because they came right out of the movies. We're going to go back to the time, for today's episode, we're going to go back to the time before there was home video. We know what happens today with home video. A movie comes out into theaters, goes through its run, and it is put on a DVD, Blu-ray. Back in 1948, this was not an available option. And TV itself was in its was in its very early stages, and was not was not at its height of popularity. So what that meant was, if you made a movie, well, what do you do with the movie once it's made? How do you continue to make some money off the story and continue to popularize the movie? And the answer was a wide variety of shows. We'll mention some of them: the Screen Actors Show, the Screen Directors Show, and so you would go ahead and you would have actors, preferably the actors from the actual movie, come on and act out the movie on the radio. And so this is what we're going to listen to. This one is a real special one. This one is from the Screen Guild Players Theater, October 7th, 1948. And it's called Northside 77 with Jimmy Stewart. Now, it's rare to find a Jimmy Stewart detective movie, but this is a pretty interesting episode, and we're going to go ahead and listen to call Northside 77 with Jimmy Stewart, and then we'll come back.
So how do I talk about this? I mean, I think there are a couple of approaches popularly used on the internet when people review extremely early work of their own. One is to get, really defensive about it and insist that it was really good. I am not even going to attempt that. Too much respect for your intelligence. Another approach is just to rake yourself over the coals. Pick apart every mistake so that you have become better than the person you were when you recorded that, and beat your critics to the punch by beating your past self up. And I have to admit that that's a little bit tempting. That kind of hits into a lot of natural inclinations of my own personality. But I think I need to learn to stop doing things like that to myself. And I'll be a little bit kinder. Though I would like to know what was running through my head back in 2009 that I thought I needed to tell people that they didn't have Blu-ray players in 1949. I guess I'm going to take a tack of stepping back and analyzing why I did that. And I think there are a few reasons. Number one, I was excited. I don't generally get into a very elevated tone when I'm happy. I'm not particularly demonstrative. I often have to force myself when it's socially indicated to be that way. But my natural indication is much more of a sort of droopy / Eeyore approach to excitement. And there's nothing I love more than a new idea, and I'm wanting to give you all of the details because I'm so excited about it. Truth be told, as long as that went on, some of that could have rightfully been saved for the post-show commentary, and because I think I did feel that I was going on quite a bit, so I rushed that and made it even worse. The other thing is that I think I was at a stage where I kind of had confused spontaneity for authenticity. That if I thought that the best way that I could be authentic with my listeners is just give totally raw reactions to what I was hearing. And I think over time I've really learned that doesn't suit my personality type, and that I can reflect a little. I rarely, go off of written notes, but I can mentally think about the episode and kind of organize my thoughts before I talk about something. I was not doing it at that point. And there are people for whom, being spontaneous really works. But I don't think I am quite as fast on my feet as I thought I was, and certainly not as I thought that I needed to be. So that I think was a big difference there. I was also a bit nervous lowering expectations. I heard that part where I said I was not Edward R. Murrow. And I think on the Dragnet program, I'd gotten some, I always have gotten mostly positive feedback, but I didn't get quite the same percentage of positive feedback on the Dragnet program. And when you get those negative criticisms, I guess it's possible to really take them to heart. Particularly, when you're, in your 20s and, just getting started out on your own. So I was, a bit insecure too, and not entirely sure of what I was doing. That's also in a little, even beyond just the whole podcasting stuff, which I was navigating myself, is I don't think I fully knew a whole lot about radio and the world of old-time radio. I was starting a podcast, I'd really limited myself previously to Dragnet and Superman as my prime exposures before I started listening to various old-time radio, online radio stations. And so I'd not really immersed myself in the world and all of its mechanics, and I kind of learned about it by doing the podcast. I don't know that it is an approach I would recommend to new podcasters to find a topic you don't know anything about and start your podcast and learn about it as you go. That's certainly how I got started out. And that's really all I have to say about that. Now we're going to go ahead and talk about the series that we did in season 1. Now, we had 5 episodes. We were doing Monday through Friday. We were still doing the old-time Dragnet program as a separate podcast on Saturdays. And 4 of the 5 podcasts, we stuck with the exact same show the entire season. Now, in my memory, this was because it would be beneficial to have stability in my lineup the first year as I built the podcast. And that may have been part of it. But listening to the commentary, I kind of feel like another part of it, which I may not have remembered, is because I was not as familiar with all the old-time radio programs. I wanted to give myself some time to familiarize myself with the different detective shows in figuring out what I would want to do in subsequent seasons. And so it made sense not to be, switching around to a bunch of different shows, particularly if I hadn't had time to vet them. Box 13 was our Monday program, and it starred Alan Ladd as reporter Dan Holliday, who quit his job to become a mystery novelist. And in order to gather plots for his novels, he placed an ad in the newspaper advertising for adventure.
I said there's a message in box 13 for you. Here.
Oh. Thanks, Susie.
Don't mention it. Say, aren't you going to open it?
Sorry. Not here, Susie.
You know, you got all of us down here at the Star Times awful curious, Mr. Holliday, running that ad.
Have I?
You've been running it for months. Why don't you change it?
Well, I haven't read it for so long I've forgotten the words. How's it go?
Don't you remember? Adventure wanted. We'll go any place, do anything.
Box 13 raised some questions for listeners right out of the gate, as Dan Holliday was not actually a professional detective. In fact, many would class Box 13 as an adventure program. However, this is something that I really decided to show some flexibility on. Most of the time, Dan's adventures involve solving mysteries, no different than what a typical detective would do. These mysteries often had very different plots just because of the overall story setup. And I love Box 13 so much that it became part of my email address. It's just a great concept that invites so many interesting stories, and I think most listeners really enjoyed it quite a bit.
Mr. Holmes? Oh, Mr. Holmes? I tried the door. It wasn't locked. The apartment was dark. I was fumbling for the light switch when... If I say I was fresh as a daisy after that thump on my head, I'd never get to be the father of my country. I was lying on the floor. The room was still dark except for a flashing light that came from a store sign across the street. I lay there for a minute to give the room a little time to stop spinning, then I realized I was holding something in my hand. And from where I lay, it felt like a gun. I was just crawling to my feet when...
Mr. Holmes, I've come with the fresh towels. Mr. Holmes.
I wanted to clear up a lot more before anyone found me. I ducked behind the door and waited.
Mr. Holmes?
Why did you scream? Well, who wouldn't? The room was a shambles. Someone had searched it. And lying on the bed in an alcove was a man who certainly would have no further interest in me. Or anything else. There was a hole in his forehead.
As I was doing the old-time Dragnet program as kind of my flagship effort at this point, I thought it would be great to have a series starring Jack Webb. And so our first Tuesday program would be Pat Novak for Hire. In retrospect, I don't think that this necessarily did much for fans of Dragnet. If I've been told one thing by Dragnet fans over the years, there seems to be an opinion that Jack Webb was Joe Friday, and there's not really an interest in other roles. However, Pat Novak for Hire was very much the type of series that I've always intended our Tuesday programs to cover. There were less well-known or off-the-beaten stories. Series that were often quite unique, and certainly Pat Novak for Hire was that. It took the conventions of the hard-boiled detective genre and took them massively over the top, producing a love-it-or-hate-it concoction. Beginning with Webb providing an iconic, although not Chamber of Commerce approved, monologue on San Francisco.
Pat Novak for Hire. Down on the waterfront in San Francisco, you always bite off more than you can chew. It's tough on your windpipe, but you don't go hungry. And down here, a lot of people figure it's better to be a fat guy in a graveyard than a thin guy in a stew. That way, you can be sure of a tight fit. Well, I rent boats and do anything else that makes a sound like money. It works out all right, if your mother doesn't mind you coming home for Easter in a box. I found that out Wednesday night about 9 o'clock.
The series had a lot of beats that were repeated. Novak getting into fights, Novak getting knocked out, Novak going to a drunk named Jocko Manigan, who was an ex-doctor, for help, and being treated to a soliloquy. Dialogue and style were, as I said, very unique, and perhaps noteworthy enough given Jack Webb's reputation the decades to come, was that there was definitely a very rocky relationship with police.
When I walked out of headquarters, I had a nice mess to juggle. It was like trying to walk the baby on a floor full of marbles. If things didn't add up for Hellman, they weren't going to do any better for me. I knew that gun I had went off. If it did, what happened to the bullet, and where did the other one come from? And why weren't there two shots? Well, I couldn't put my finger on a thing, and nothing added up. It was like trying to follow a grain of rice in a Shanghai suburb. So I looked up Lee Underwood's address, and I went by her apartment. The girl downstairs told me that she worked at a nightclub out on the Bay Shore Highway. Well, I had to hit a couple of places, so I looked up the only honest guy I know. An ex-doctor and a boozer by the name of Jocko Madigan. A good man until he began to figure the last drink in the bottle is just as easy to get at as the first.
After Pat Novak, we presented another Jack Webb series, this one a short one known as Johnny Madero. And I guess you could summarize Johnny Madero by saying it was pretty much a straight-up rip-off of Pat Novak for Hire, for reasons that get explained when I do the actual series.
You know, it doesn't pay to buy a fast car in San Francisco because most of the time you got to be in low gear. The town is laid out like the profile of a chorus line, and the only time it flattens out is where it runs into the bay. The waterfront goes from south of the ferry building out past the China docks, and on a clear day you can see them batting baseballs over on Alcatraz. Pier 23 is over toward the left field side. Not far from there, you'll find Johnny Madero's boat shop. My place. Oh, I rent boats, and I do anything else that means long odds and short hours. It's a way to make a living. And if you never save enough to get married, at least you got enough to leave town. Maybe I should have left town Monday afternoon.
When I planned the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio out, I made the dubious decision to triple down on Jack Webb program, following up with yet another detective series that Jack Webb starred in. In retrospect, this was probably not a beneficial idea. Those who were Jack Webb fans listening to Dragnet were probably already on board. There's also a contingent of fans for whom Jack Webb really is not believable in any role that isn't Joe Friday. Be that as it may, we did go ahead and play Jeff Regan Investigator. Webb starred in the initial Jeff Regan series in 1948. It was one of the more hard-boiled private detective programs, with a pretty high degree of violence, which also meant some really good sound design. I remember listening to one episode of Jeff Regan and kind of flinching, like I had been slapped as I listened to the action. Regan was almost literally a low-rent version of Philip Marlowe. Philip Marlowe famously had his own office and charged $25 a day plus expenses. Jeff Regan, somewhat uniquely, was employed by a shady private detective agency headed by Anthony J. Lyon, which is one reason why the series got the nickname The Lion's Eye. However, Regan was very much a tough guy and had a tempestuous relationship with practically everyone, including his boss.
Hello, Regan. I just talked to the doctor. It's going to cost plenty. How bad is it? $25 a day for a room, plus surgery. No, I mean Canto. Oh. Bullet penetrated upper lobe of his right lung. Here, they pulled this out. 45 slug. Who shoots 45s that good? Lots of people. Same kind of people who go around killing Pete Berger and Max Vladney. Yeah. Canto getting himself shot's going to eat up every penny we might have made on this thing. Is money all you ever think of? What else is there to think about? If you got it, you're fine. If you haven't got it, you're nothing but a bum. One of your own men is lying in there wondering if he's ever going to live or die, and he took that slug because you sent him on the job. Everybody dies. I'll give him a citation. Oh, you big pile of blubber. I ought to push you out a window. Now, talk like that isn't going to help anything. No, but I know what is. Now, wait a minute, Regan. This is a police job. Oh, now it's a police job. Yeah, like I told you.
There were 20 Jack Webb-led episodes of Jeff Regan. However, that wasn't the end of the story. Webb left Regan in 1948 for a nationally broadcast version of Pat Novak for Hire, and then later Dragnet. But CBS decided to retool the series. They cast Frank Graham as the lead. And then they also cast Frank Nelson, a well-known comic actor, as Anthony J. Lyon. With Nelson in the lead, Anthony J. Lyon became less the domineering boss and more the eccentric uncle, making for a very fun combination.
It was 10 in the morning when I checked in at the office. The lion was singing.
There was a boy, a very strange, enchanted boy.
Oh, nature boy.
Oh, Jeffrey.
Still packing away the wheat, Fatso?
Oh, yes. Notice how much weight I've lost already, my boy. You know, this morning I saw my cheekbones for the first time in years.
Oh, eyes sunken, color gray.
Jeffrey, I've never felt so healthy. Yeah, I've been eating nothing but golden grains of patented wheat.
Patented?
Yeah, patented. You know, Miss Shoulder eats nothing but health foods, Jeffrey. Last night she recommended a health food restaurant where we might have lunch. The Grated Garbanzo Grotto.
Fine.
It serves nothing but the finest dried soybeans.
Good.
It began airing in the fall of 1949 and continued until the fall of 1950. 1949 scripts tended to be a bit more hard-boiled, while the 1950 scripts tended to lean more into the comedy aspects, with titles like She's Lovely, She's Engaged, She Eats Soybeans. However, the show could also deliver its dramatic moments as well. This was an interesting aspect of this series because as the season went on, at the start of the year, I thought we might have 5 or 8 episodes of Jeff Regan with Frank Graham and Paul Dubov, who took over the role for 7 weeks. And I kept finding more and more episodes with the Frank Graham or Paul Dubov, but they just weren't centrally collected anywhere back in 2010. So Jeff Regan ended up carrying me all the way through the end of our first season into the start of the second. So that brings us on to Wednesday. And for Wednesdays, I went with Let George Do It, which, given how the series grabbed my attention and reawakened my love of the detective genre, it was a natural choice for me. Although a lot of listeners had other programs they preferred, particularly Richard Diamond, Let George Do It was such a good program in my opinion, and I still think it's underrated for both the writing and the acting of Bob Bailey and the supporting cast. One challenge I had with it from the beginning is that it started out as a detective sitcom, complete with laugh track. And even when it was funny, you could say that some of the comedy wasn't exactly dignified.
Valentine, now for your second lesson.
Oh, but do you think I'm ready to ride this horse, Sonny?
Oh, sure.
Okay, then. Boost me up.
Okay, there you go.
Thanks.
Now, put your feet in the stirrups, Mr. Valentine.
Like this?
Yeah, that's right. Press your knees in.
Like this?
Yeah, that's good. Now, hold on to the reins with your left hand.
That's right.
Oh, you look fine, Mr. Valentine. Okay, here we go. Oh, that's good. That's swell. Hang on, Mr. Valentine. Don't fall off.
Oh, Sonny, I'm getting dizzy. Sonny, I can't see anything. Sonny, help! Stop this merry-go-round!
I remember getting an email from a listener who was upset and practically accusing me of false advertising. This is a sitcom, not a detective program, and I promised we were going to get into something that looked more like a detective program shortly. Now, I should note that in the late 2010s, more programs from this sort of sitcom era of Let George Do It came into circulation, and we played those during season 10. But I have to say that I'm kind of grateful they weren't around when I was doing the first season of Let George Do It. We did the more comedic episodes that were in circulation, and then within a few weeks, we were into the type of detective stories that made Let George Do It such an exciting and compelling series.
Say, mister, they tell me you're looking for information.
Who tells you?
Oh, word gets around. It's about PB, ain't it?
Yeah, that's right. Got anything I can use?
If you're willing to pay for it. What do you say we step out here?
All right, come on, give.
You know, you took the words right out of my mouth, mister.
Okay, mister. Here's 5 tens. And don't try chiseling for more because it won't work.
I wouldn't do this to my best friend, except I had a bad day at the track.
Never mind that. Now, where do I find Phil Bettner?
22.5 Jackson Place.
Then we had what I think to me was a no-brainer in order to really build a good audience. And on Thursdays, we brought people old-time radio episodes of Sherlock Holmes. Now, I did get off to a bumpy start. One thing that listeners can reasonably ask is, where's episode 4 and episode 9? The first 2 Sherlock Holmes episodes we played. Well, the situation is that I thought, and the programs were labeled, as episodes from the 1930s starring Richard Gordon as Sherlock Holmes. The episodes were mislabeled and were in fact under copyright. To be fair to me, they weren't in great shape. They were really scratchy, and to my undertrained ear, it sounded like something that plausibly could have been from the 1930s. However, once I learned that the episodes in question were copyrighted and mislabeled, I've removed them from circulation, and we won't be including them in Volume 1. After those two, we had a few episodes starring Louis Hector, which were actually from the mid-1930s, and the quality of the recording showed it. It was very scratchy. There were some fun episodes in there, including one that reminds me a bit, in terms of its plot, of Rear Window. Then we played Orson Welles' adaptation of William Gillette's Sherlock Holmes play, The Immortal Sherlock Holmes, which is a fine production that I've only grown in appreciation for over the years. And then we got to play the Basil Rathbone Sherlock Holmes episodes. And these were such a delight to listen to. I really loved Rathbone as Holmes. He was such a superb actor, and he really brought a warmth to the role. And I can imagine some folks thinking it may be a little bit too warm, but nevertheless, I really enjoyed it. Plus, I think the actual friendship with Nigel Bruce makes some really compelling chemistry between Holmes and Watson. Sadly, the vast majority of his performances over the radio as Holmes were missing, and none of them have really come into circulation, which is such a shame. But we do get to hear some episodes from earlier in his run as Sherlock Holmes on the radio, which is nice because that's before he started to tire of the role. But still, it barely shows, if at all, in the performances that we do have, even though they are really strongly centered in his final season and a third. Again, I really do enjoy him as Holmes, and I hope you enjoy it as well.
Stop, brother. You play well, but Sarasate Zigeunerweisen is not the true gypsy music. I've heard it in London and in Budapest. They call it gypsy. But what can a gorgio know of the true heart of Romany? Wait here. I will get my own violin.
Charming girl, charming. But why does she keep on talking about gorgios? Is that more of their confounded gibberish?
A gorgio, chap, is the term they use for anyone who is not a true gypsy.
Now I will play for you the real gypsy airs.
Thank you. I should appreciate it very much. But before you begin, I wonder if I might ask you a question.
A friend of Pyramus may ask me any question. What is it?
I observed you telling fortunes earlier on tonight. You refused to tell a certain gentleman's hand and gave the money back. Did you know who the gentleman was?
No, brother. Nor the noisy woman with him. I refused to pen the dockerin because I saw blood and violent death in his hand. Violent death that is soon to come.
Violent death? Good Lord.
Watson, old fellow, I want you to do me a favor.
Yes, of course I will. What is it?
I must remain here until Jasper Hearn comes back. I should like you to return to the inn. It's more than possible that we may have news from our client before the night is out.
Then we turn to a radio standard, yours truly, Johnny Dollar. And I'd never listened to it before beginning the process of doing this series. I'd listened to a couple episodes with each Johnny Dollar to kind of make sure that I liked them well enough to listen through their run on the series. We first of all started off with the Dick Powell audition, and then we got into the Charles Russell run. And I'll be honest that I don't think I appreciated Russell's run as much as I would later on. It's still not my favorite, but I think I was a little hard on it. To me, Russell was a little too jokey and silly, but not in a way that was particularly likable. I didn't think it wore particularly well. At times, it was just a little too ridiculous.
Item 7, 65 cents. Purchase a phonograph record, Frank Sinatra singing Night and Day. With this for ammunition, I went back to my hotel room and, gunning for a bird I'd never seen, I set up the phonograph near the telephone, put on the record, and placed a call to the number Mrs. Drake had called earlier in the day. Hello there. 7 p.m. again, and this is your favorite disc jockey, Happy Jack the Money Man. Yes, your favorite disc jockey, your spinner with the winners. Tell me, are you listening to our show?
My radio is not on. Goodbye.
Oh, hold the phone, madam. A little thing like that doesn't make any difference to Happy Jack. Here's all you have to do to win a house full of prizes. Now, you just listen closely over the phone and identify today's puzzle platter, and you'll win all these wonderful prizes. A genuine Sunbeam Mixmaster that makes those fresh little eggs just happy to get beat up. Yes, and you'll clean up with the next prize. Make a real clean sweep with a Hoover vacuum cleaner with all attachments and no strings attached. And to send you tripping happily through life, you'll also receive a handsome set of easy-to-lug luggage, a pair of Gladiator bags. Are you interested?
I kind of think I may have been a little too uptight about it. Particularly when we got into the Christmas episode, which I didn't care much for. And again, even though it's not my favorite, I thought that I was not fair to this era. So I hope you'll keep that in mind. Edmund O'Brien, on the other hand, I really enjoyed and continue to enjoy. I don't think his performance was the only valid take, but I kind of like what he did with the character. It's a huge departure once he really sets his portrayal, which I think does take a few episodes. He really went into a darker, more hard-boiled portrayal. It may have been one of the more grounded, hard-boiled detective takes. Because so often hard-boiled detectives in radio tended to be a bit over the top and have dialogue that we can't help but laugh at in the style of Pat Novak. He really tapped into a sort of world weariness and a desire for justice, as well as an understanding of the underdog that I think really does set him apart from a lot of radio detectives.
Mr. Peeler was cleared of responsibility for Al Roda's murder, now being held on conspiracy to defraud. I hope since the policy on the remaining cargo of rubber can now be canceled, Intercontinental is minimizing the monetary loss in Singapore. To you, the loss is a little more than $100,000 and an operative. I have lost a friend.
The scripts kind of leaned into that direction almost a little bit too much, as it seemed like some weeks they were trying to find new ways to end on a downer. Still, O'Brien continued to do a solid job throughout his run on the series. In addition to our regular Monday through Friday run, we began the tradition of doing specials in celebration of milestones. The first being for our 100th episode special, we played the Screen Guild Theater presentation of The Maltese Falcon. And for the 200th, we played the suspense presentation of the Sam Spade story, The Candy Tooth Keeper. I did those because I knew it was going to be a little while until I got to play Sam Spade on the podcast, and decided it made sense to give listeners who were clamoring for it a little bit of a sample. We did other things not related to Sam Spade. After the 100 episode special, we did a special for the 150th episode, in which Alan Ladd played a detective in an episode of Suspense One-Way Ride to Nowhere. And then we did an intriguing pilot episode for a series, San Francisco Final, in which he played a newspaperman. It was a really good and intriguing pilot. It's the type of thing that may have made it as a full series 2 or 3 years earlier, but sadly just didn't make the cut when it was released in 1954. The decision to play specials was one I had conflicting feelings on, because I have high standards for things to celebrate. And to me, it's like 100 episodes is not a big milestone when you're doing 5 episodes per week. And the habit that I set up of celebrating every 50 episodes thereafter, one that I occasionally feel a twinge of discomfort over, for celebrating something that most people wouldn't consider a milestone like 2,650 episodes. Ultimately, the reason that I ended up setting out to do all those specials is, one, because it's fun to find some of these programs and play them, outside of the typical Monday through Friday programs, because there's a lot of mysteries and one-shot stories that are still really entertaining and that I like to share with people. And it's a thank you to the listeners for sticking with me for another 50 episodes. We also had the beginning of video theater. However, unlike, I hate to say the modern, but the more recent video theater, we started out with unhosted video. This was probably the earliest sort of collaboration or partnership that I had set up. And the app was initially launched for Apple, would later be done for Android. And the app maker really encouraged me to add value. And so I decided, in addition to the radio, we would do a video version in video theater. The way that it would work is that I would upload the videos raw, and then I would add a commentary file as a bonus feature in the app, so people could listen to my commentary after watching the video. This was not really something that connected with audiences, so after a few episodes, I essentially stopped doing the commentary on the videos. Nobody ever responded, so I assumed that it was probably not missed. And I think that to actually work, it needed to be integrated as we've done the last few years. And if I ever do record commentaries on seasons 6 and 7, I think I'll probably get into that. Now, in addition to the videos, I also decided to offer app extras, which would be episodes featuring actors who star in radio detective programs playing in other roles. And it's a feature of the app that people have definitely, listened to and enjoyed, and I've enjoyed it as well. Near the end of every month, going back to late 2009, early 2010, I go to the Radio Gold Index and I search through the index of performances by stars in the Great Detectives programs. And I pick out 3 episodes from different actors in the series, and we'll go ahead and upload those as extras with my commentary. I don't tend to be as extensive on most of those because they're not detective programs, but some of them I do really get into. And while I think some listeners may find some more entertaining than others, and certainly I find some more entertaining than others, it's helped me really broaden my knowledge of radio and find things that have kind of helped me and inspired me in other series. The app would probably be the biggest long-term success that I would take out of the first season in terms of partnerships and building something that really has lasted a long time. Other efforts would be more frustrating. In the late 2000s, podcasting was something that was filled with great promise. But many of those promises didn't pan out, at least not for me, at least not initially. Back then, there were ridiculous, over-the-top rates quoted, like $30 or $40 advertising revenue being paid per 1,000 downloads. I never anticipated making that sort of money or getting nearly as many downloads as I had. But I had a couple of different sponsorship arrangements on my Old Time Dragnets podcast at different times. And so it seemed like if I built a good audience, could get some sponsorships. And my hope was not to be fabulously wealthy or build a money bin, but to be able to focus full time on what people these days call content creation. My ambition was simply to do what I love full time, writing and podcasting. And so you'll hear a bunch of efforts in season 1 that are along those lines. Affiliate campaigns and various sorts of attempts to find and build revenue streams that would mostly be unsuccessful. Towards the end of the season, there are some sponsored episodes, but those would be the only sponsored episodes that I would have for years to come. There were a couple of things going on. The first was that after the Great Recession, a lot of people pulled back from podcast advertising. Certainly brands saw potential in it, but they were just kind of like, I don't know how this is going to work, and right now, with the economy being what it is, we want to spend our dollars where we can expect it to work. The second thing is that I'd built a show that most podcast advertising programs were not built for. There are not a ton of daily, 5-day-a-week podcasts out there, particularly that are long form. Unless you're dealing with a podcast that's essentially re-syndicating a terrestrial talk show. In addition, many podcasts were able to command a high payment per download for advertising because they hit a very specific audience. If you have a very good tech podcast, then you're going to be able to more easily run tech ads, and tech companies can target their ads to your listenership. My audience was not a monolith. And there were no obvious sort of affiliate arrangements that would work for everybody. So I would spend a lot of time trying to find ways to advertise and monetize the podcast in a world where it just was not set up to work for me. So my best laid plans did not work out. And indeed, it haven't even totally worked out to this day. But I was still having fun doing the podcast. And while I would receive criticism, both fair and unfair, I had a growing listening audience. The numbers didn't lie. And we also received notes indicating the podcast was making a positive difference. And all the encouragement and support, plus the fun I had listening to the programs, discovering new programs, really carried me forward. I was still at a point where I was spending time when I wasn't listening to detective programs to podcasts, listening to detective programs to weigh whether I would include them or not in my podcast. And some I would just get so excited about. Oh, I want to go ahead and bring listeners this series. And people will love that. And I just can't wait to show them that. And I just think they will enjoy this so much. So I had a combination of positive feedback from listeners, enjoying the programs that I was sharing, and thinking about the ones that I wanted to share in future years, really propelling me ahead despite disappointment with not being able to find the advertiser that I'd hoped to be able to find. I did sometimes feel guilty as we were doing this podcast for so long. And I sometimes found myself thinking, is it right to invest this much time, this much energy, this much passion into something that wasn't providing a big economic return? And here I really have to give credit and acknowledge my wife. Because in all those years, she never said, Adam, you're spending too much time on this podcast and stuff. Or she never threw up some of the dreams and hopes I had early on and said, this is just not working out. You need to be practical here. Never did that at all, and I'm so grateful for her patience and support through all those years. And really, it comes down to the joy of doing the podcast, combined with her support, combined with the support of listeners that allowed us to move through season 1 and beyond. And that, at last, is the end of this commentary. I know it went on quite a while. I will record one for season 2, but after that we'll just kind of see. Season 2 won't be as long. We won't have as much origin story stuff to cover. And if you do have comments on things specifically you'd like us to talk about, then do send me an email at box13@greatdetectives.net. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.
Welcome to the Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham. This is kind of our preview episode, and we're going to talk about what the show's about. We're doing this particular episode for a couple reasons. One's just to give a brief introduction, and then the other thing is just to allow people to subscribe to the show. If they like the concept, if they're going to want to follow the show, then they'll be able to download the episode, subscribe to it on iTunes. The show itself will start in 2 weeks, October 26th. October 26th will be the start of the actual show's launch. And what we're going to do on the show is this show will feature detectives of all sorts. We'll have hard-boiled, soft-boiled. If there's a title of midway-boiled detectives, we'll have that as well. We'll have commentary before and after. I don't claim to be Edwin R. Murrow or great voice of radio, but just kind of to talk and to add a little insight and perhaps a little humor to these great shows. What's going to make this different is we are actually going to follow each series that we do from start to finish in terms of available episodes. And so this is what we're going to listen to. This one is a real special one. This one is from the Screen Guild Players Theater, October 7th, 1948, and it's called Northside 77 with Jimmy Stewart. Now, it's rare to find a Jimmy Stewart detective movie, but this is a pretty interesting episode, and we're going to go ahead and listen to Call Northside 77 with Jimmy Stewart. And then we'll come back.
For the first time on the air, the Screen Guild Players present Call Northside 777, starring James Stewart, Pat O'Brien, and Richard Conte. Well, first of all, let's get one thing straight. I didn't just dream this story up. Now, it's right off the record. It really happened. So, if the people in it resemble characters, living or dead, well, believe me, it's strictly intentional. On October the 10th, 1944, I was a reporter on the Chicago Times. October 10th, 1944. Remember that date's important. That was the morning the ad appeared. A little ad in our classified section. a personal notice that said
$5,000 reward for the killers of Police Officer Bundy on December 9th, 1932. Call Northside for 777 12 to 7 p.m. Ask for Tilly Vicek.
I didn't notice the ad myself, but Brian Kelly did. Kelly was our city editor. There wasn't much in the paper he ever missed. And whenever Kelly got an idea, he usually had me do something about it.
Well, call it curiosity, Mac. Well, I don't know why it's worth $5,000 to somebody to find out who killed a cop 11 years ago.
Well, in 1932, it was open season on cops. On the north side, they were shooting them in pairs like a brace of ducks.
Well, it won't hurt to check. Maybe you'll get your name in the paper.
Kelly, this is sucker bait. Every grifter and mooch in town will be after that $5,000. They'll frame their own brothers to get it. Hey, maybe this is a frame. Hey, this thing has a lot of angles.
Yeah, see what I mean? Just takes you longer to catch up.
Oh, no. Well, I was thinking about it. You using that phone?
Now, go right ahead.
All right. Hello, Betty? Hey, give me a number, will you? Yeah. Yeah, I want Northside 777. Tilly Vicek wasn't home. They said she worked nights, and they told me where. It was one of those big office buildings downtown. I found her on the 7th floor in the corridor, on her hands and knees with a scrubbing brush and a bucket of water. I showed her the ad, and she got up quickly.
Yes, that is for me. You know something, mister?
No, I'm a reporter from the Chicago Times.
Oh?
We'd like to know why you're so interested in finding the killers of this cop.
Frank Vicek is my son. He is in prison for killing him. My friends tell me if I offer big money, maybe somebody will tell who killed this policeman.
You mean your son's in prison for killing the cop, is that right?
Yes, but he don't do it. My Frank is a good boy. He don't do this thing.
Yeah. All right. Now, this $5,000. Where'd you get that?
That is important.
Yes, it's very important. You might have had it hidden away, or maybe you got it from some mob that's trying to spring it, you know?
No, it's mine. I work. I scrub floors. 11 years I save every penny. I never miss a day's work so I can get Frank out. I dream of this day.
Oh, $5,000 is a lot for a dream.
Yes, 11 years I dream and I work. First I tried $3,000. Nothing. Now I try $5,000.
And suppose it's still nothing.
Then I work 11 more years. I get $10,000. But my boy, someday he get out.
Well, it made a pretty good yarn, I guess. You know, mother slaves to save $5,000. Offers it to clear her son. I told myself it was all in a day's work. I wrote it and tried to forget it. I tried. Kelly didn't.
Swell story, Max. Swell. It's got size.
Thanks.
Almost too good for a one-day run. Why not go up and interview the boy?
Oh, now, wait a minute. I'm not glorifying any cop killer.
You got proof he is a cop killer?
Well, they didn't give him 99 years for playing hooky. He had a record. He was on probation when he shot the cop.
Yeah, I know. I looked it up, too. He was public enemy number one. He and a couple of other kids broke into a grocery store. He got a few candy bars and a record. Look, Mac, let's put it this way. Maybe I'm interested for a personal reason. Because my mother did the same thing. She scrubbed floors on her hands and knees for more than 11 years to send me through school.
Okay, I'll go up to the pen and see him in the morning. How about expenses?
Here's a voucher. Take it to the cashier.
Right. Kelly.
Yeah?
I happen to know that your mother had a small annuity. She never scrubbed a floor in her life, and you never got out of the 5th grade.
Well,
But I just figure if you pulled such a corny gag, you must want me to go up there pretty bad, so I'm going.
Oh, swell. Swell. Keep the expenses down, will you, Mac?
I guess the warden told you, Frank. I'm from the Chicago Times.
Yes, sir, he told me.
Of course, you don't have to answer any of these questions if you don't want to.
Oh, but I do want to. Sure I want to.
Fine. All right. I'd like more of your story, your side of it. I need an angle, something to hit the public with, you understand?
Yes, sir.
Now, you knew about the ad your mother put in the papers about the $5,000 reward?
That's right.
Now, did you know that she was scrubbing floors to get the money?
Yes, sir, I did. All she lives for is to get me out. I guess that's all I've got to live for, too.
You know, if you're guilty, you're letting her slave her life away for nothing. You know
she knows I'm not guilty.
Well, I don't know. I read all the news clips, the transcript of the trial. They don't exactly whitewash you.
I know, but you only read what convicted me. All the true facts didn't come out. Even Judge Moulton said I wasn't guilty.
But the judge who gave you 99 years?
Well, he had to do that. The jury said we were guilty. But in his chambers, he said he knew we were innocent.
When was that?
After he sentenced us.
Oh, after. Well, I think maybe we better duck that.
What else? My lawyer was a drunk. He didn't even let me in on the stand because he was afraid I'd get the chair.
Go on.
Well, when they question you hour after hour, you're bound to get mixed up on a lot of little things. The cops didn't even listen to me on the important things. They had to have a conviction. So they went ahead and got it.
That's a good angle. Railroaded.
And then they took me from one police station to another every few hours, taking me around the horn, they call it. So my lawyer couldn't get me out. And then this Fender Skutnik.
Skutnik. That's the dame around the speakeasy. Right?
Yeah, the first come of the time she saw me, she said I wasn't one of the killers. And all of a sudden, she said I was.
Finger woman, all right. We'll play that up, too.
When that cop was killed, I was home with my wife.
That's right. That's what you said at the trial, I remember. Say, does she come up here and visit you?
My wife?
Yeah.
No, not anymore. We divorced.
That's what kept sticking in my craw. If his wife didn't believe him, how could I? But I couldn't forget that old lady scrubbing floors. And that's the way I wrote the story. Not guilty, says Weechek, places faith in mother. And by the next night, Kelly was full of ideas.
Nice work, Mac. We're getting up to 20 phone calls an hour on that story. What are you going to use for a follow-up?
Follow-up?
Oh, sure. It's snowballing. They want more of it.
What do you want to give me a raise, or do I just get the $5,000 from Weechek's mother?
Now, listen, fella, I just work here like you. I get my orders, too.
From home, the circulation department? Sure, we're selling a lot of papers. We might also be selling that dead cop short. You know, he might have a mother who scrubbed floors, too.
All right. No use blowing your top.
No? I'll tell you another thing. You remember what Weechek said about the judge promising a new trial? Well, that judge died 3 weeks after the case was closed.
Is that Weechek's fault?
No, I'm just saying that he's pretty sharp, giving me a lead he knew I couldn't check.
Look, Mac, if you're so sure he's guilty and there's nothing more to the story, then end it. Write a finished piece and kill it.
Okay, I'll take that deal. I'll interview his wife.
His wife?
Yeah. She believed in him so much she got a divorce. Put that in your paper, Kelly. That ought to kill it for keeps. You see, I've been wondering what you think about Frank.
Frank is innocent. He didn't do it. He was home with me when that policeman was killed.
You wouldn't be saying that because you loved him. Then, I mean.
Yes, I did love him. I loved him very much.
So you got a divorce and married somebody else, huh?
Only because Frank insisted on it.
Look, would you mind repeating that?
Frank made me do it. He made me get the divorce. And then he made me get married again.
Well, why?
So our boy would have a chance in life. So he'd grow up with another name.
I guess the story I wrote that night was a little different from the one I'd planned, but it had a nice lead. Divorced wife believes Weechek is innocent. And the next day, Kelly was on my neck again.
Mac, I know there's nothing more to the Weechek case. I know it's all washed up, but at the same time,
But what?
Well, I just got a call from the warden. Weechek wants to see you again.
What for?
Maybe he wants to confess.
Yeah, but I was up there. Don't I get time off for good behavior?
Weechek's been there for 11 years. You better take that first train up in the morning.
Hello, Weechek. I understand you want to see me.
Yes. I want to tell you something. I don't want you to write any more about me or my family.
No?
No. We poured out our hearts to you, and all it meant was just...
Oh, wait a minute. You wanted help, don't you? We've got 500,000 people following this story. Someone might know the killers.
What do you think you're kidding?
My mother's doing this for me, not to sell your papers. I don't know. I thought I was doing a pretty good job for you. Putting my boy's picture in the paper, spoiling his whole life. I don't want that kind of help. I'll stay here 1,000 years. Just don't write about us anymore. That's all. Wow, you seem pretty... Look, Frank, suppose I went on with your case and did my best to slant the story your way. I want you to know that I still don't think you're innocent, but I'm willing to dig, get the facts. The facts? And remember this, the first time I catch you lying, I'll blast you so hard you won't even get your parole when your 99 years is up. How about it? Is it a deal? I got nothing to be afraid of. Yes, I'll make that deal. Okay. All right, now let's start talking. Was there any witness when Judge Moulton told you he'd try and get you another trial? Well, there was the bailiff. Yeah, what was his name? I don't know. All right, I'll find out. Who was your lawyer? Well, his name was Underwood. But he's disbarred now. He was a drunk. Oh, that's great. A dead judge and a disbarred lawyer. All right, what else now? Well, there was Fenda Skutnik. She was the woman who ran the speakeasy. She identified me. The other two witnesses said no. Yeah, keep going. Then there was the police captain. He stood right alongside of Fenda Skutnik when she picked me out. Mm-hmm. She acted like she was afraid of him. What was his name? I never found out. He wasn't at the trial. Oh, brother, that's fine. Where can I find this Skutnik day? I don't know. You know, this is great material I've got here. Well, it's all I got, but it's the truth. I swear it. Look, would you be willing to take a lie detector test? Mr. McNeil, for 11 years I've been waiting for a chance at that box. You know what you're up against. If it turns out bad, you're cooked. If it turns out good, it isn't legal evidence. I'll take the test. Okay. All right, I'll set it up for you.
Say, seen a report on that lie detector test?
Yeah.
Thought you had. Well, gives we check a pretty clean bill of health, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sure you don't want some of the sandwich?
No, thanks. I don't know. My stomach's a little jittery. I guess it's something I ate.
Sure, something you wrote.
Now look, Kelly. Just don't think that I've got...
All right, slow down, Mac. Why don't you let go and tell yourself the truth? You want him to be innocent. You want him to be free. Admit it.
Maybe you're right. Maybe I do want him to be free, but that doesn't make me believe he's innocent.
If you want to believe, that's a pretty good start. And remember, fellow, I'll be in there swinging with you all the way.
Thanks, Kelly. Thanks. Kelly.
Yeah?
You wouldn't have some of that sandwich left, would you? Well, they say that a convert always prays the loudest, and as soon as I'd switched over to Frank Wiechek's side, I guess you could have heard me all over town. It wasn't just the story anymore. It was digging for a man's life. And I started with the bailiff, the one Frank had told me about.
Aye, it's the truth, Mr. McNeil. Judge Moulton did promise the lad a new trial. Me hand to the saints. I was there and heard him.
You remember the details, Mr. Sullivan?
Mr. McNeil, I'll have you understand, I'm the fellow that reminds the elephants.
Oh, excuse me.
You see, the way it happened as come out in the trial, this officer Bundy was having a snort in a little speakeasy run by this woman...
Wanda Skutnik?
The very same. And whilst he was warming himself, it being a cold day, these two yeggs come in and let him have it. But now there was another fellow sitting there having a drink.
I know. Truck driver, name of Gruska?
Correct. And when the trial was done, the judge, God rest his soul, had them all brought into his chambers. That's when this Gruska fellow speaks up and tells the judge that Wiechek wasn't one of the killers.
Well, what did Wanda Skutnik say?
Well, she stands pat. She claims she saw the shooting from start to finish. But then this Gruska fellow gets mad and he says she never saw any part of it. That when the fireworks started, she ducked into a closet.
Well, why didn't he say that on the witness stand?
Well, no, I guess he never had a chance. All they let him say was yes and no.
Well, the next man on my list was a little harder to find, but 4 days later I dug him out in a greasy little restaurant, washing dishes. Not exactly happy to see me either.
Yes, my name is Underwood. I was Wiechek's lawyer. I didn't care what happened to him then, and I don't care now.
Now, look.
Why should I? I'm a disbarred shyster. I'm a drunk, a fool, and a crook. My testimony is no good. My words are no good. My life's I'm no good to anybody.
Anybody but Frank Weechek.
You mean you want the advice of a dishwasher?
Yeah. My wife washes dishes every night.
All right, I'll tell you something. There's only one thing convicted Weechek, and that was the testimony of Fender Skutnik.
Yeah, but that's not new.
She said that after the murder, she didn't see Weechek again until she identified him in the police lineup. But the day before that, she was in a squad car with him.
She was with him the day before she identified him?
Yes. And they were riding Weechek around the horn from station to station, so I couldn't find him. He and Fender Skutnik sat side by side.
Well, why didn't you use that information at the trial?
I couldn't prove it.
Well, I'm going to find that Skutnik dame. I'll prove it, all right.
I'll give you some advice, McNeil. And good advice. Not shyster talk. You discredit her. You prove she's a liar. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
Now, all I had to do was to find Fender Skutnik. Except that she didn't want to be found, and Chicago's a pretty fair-sized village. But I wasn't exactly wasting my time. Checking the police files, I found that Frank had been arrested on December the 22nd, but he hadn't been booked until the 23rd. The police had held him for 24 hours. He could have been with that Skutnik dame, I said to myself, if I could only prove it. And then suddenly I got a big idea, and I raced for the nearest telephone.
City desk, Kelly.
Listen, Kelly, about the Weechek yarn. Now, I know it wasn't important back in 1932, but maybe somebody took some pictures.
Sure, you want to get one autographed?
Now, don't clown. Come on, I'm in a hurry. Now, check your files, have somebody check the other papers,
But,
too.
Mac, you've read every word that was printed on the case. You've seen every picture.
Look, Kelly. Now, a photographer shoots maybe 10 pictures and only prints one. I want to see the other 9. Kelly.
Hello, Mac. What do you got?
What have I got? I just got a pardon for Frank Weechek, that's all. Here, take a look at this picture, will you?
Shot of Weechek getting out of a squad car, huh?
And Fender Skutnik right beside him. That proves that she was lying, doesn't it? That'll invalidate everything she said.
How do you figure?
Well, she testified she didn't see Weechek between the time of the murder and the time she identified him on December the 23rd. But Frank claims she saw him on the 22nd when the cops were taking him from station to station, you see?
And you think that's when this picture was snapped, huh?
Well, obviously it was.
Look, Mac. When you come up before the pardon board, you can't just say, obviously. You've got to have proof. And this picture could have been taken after she identified.
Well, but it wasn't,
You
Kelly.
think it wasn't, and I think it wasn't. But the board will just sit there and ask for facts. You know, that could be pretty rough on Weechek. If they review his case now and turn him down, well, it might hurt his chances for parole.
Well, I wouldn't want to hurt Frank.
I know you wouldn't. I know it. You've done a great job, Mac. Nobody could have done any better.
Yeah, sure. The operation was successful, but the patient died.
Well, personally, I'd go along with you, but the front office is getting a little worried. These cracks we've taken at the police department and the state's attorney and... Well...
Okay, what do we do?
Write a finished story. Get the paper off the hook.
All right.
And then you better go out and see Weechek's mother.
No, I can't do that, Kelly. Look, I can't do that.
You wanted to read it in the paper? Do you, Mac?
No. All right, I'll go. Well, that was the toughest assignment I'd ever had. To have to tell Frank's mother we were pulling out. To have to tell her she was on her own again. On the way back to the paper in the cab, I just kept staring at that picture of Frank and then the Skutnik, and just staring at it, looking for something. You know, like when you get a letter and it's got bad news in it, and you keep reading it over and over again, hoping you've read it wrong. And I guess I didn't even hear the cab driver at first.
Seen the afternoon paper, Bud?
What?
I said, have you seen the afternoon paper?
Paper? No.
Yeah, the cops pulled a nifty one, all right. Proved some guy was a forger. First time they used that new machine.
Machine? What was it?
Yeah, a machine that enlarges things 1,000 times. They can take a piece of writing or a picture or anything and...
1,000 times?
Yeah, 1,000 times.
Brings it out clear as a bell.
Hey, do you know where the police lab is?
Police lab? Sure, it's down a few blocks from
Okay, all right. Well, don't talk. Just drive. No, wait a minute. Pull up the drugstore there, will you? I want to make a phone call first.
I dropped everything, Mac. Rushed right down. What's it all about?
We've still got a chance. Kelly, if you know how to pray, if we get a break...
Pray for what? Slow down. Give me an angle, will you?
They got a new process. It's just perfected. Enlarges pictures that you're now.
The one of Frank Wiechek and Sender Skutnik?
Yeah, but they're not working on them. Over to one side, there was this kid in the picture, a newsboy with some papers under his arm. Now, that's the part they're working on, Kelly. Kelly, if I'm right, if they can bring this thing
Almost ready, Mac. Want to come in?
We'll try and stop it.
Don't light any matches or anything. Have to develop these prints in the dark. Got it, Joe?
Yeah, it's just going into the suit now.
Kelly, remember what I said about praying?
I still don't know what you're looking for.
The date. The date on the newspapers under the newsboy's arm.
You bring that out? It's coming up now.
Watch it, Kelly. Watch it. Watch that date. There it is. It's coming through, I think. December. What is that? December 20-something.
December 22nd, 1932.
Well, as that cab driver said, it was just clear as a bell. Clear enough for even the pardon board. I guess I should be pretty happy, but there was just one thing. There were two men convicted for the murder of Officer Bundy. Two men convicted on the same evidence. One of them, Frank Wiechek, he's been pardoned now. The other one's still in jail. You know, I was sort of wondering about that. Looks like I'll have to go to work again.
Welcome back. I find it almost hard to believe some people describe this as noir. You definitely, particularly, and I've seen the actual movie. It definitely does not feel like noir. Everybody is just too nice and too virtuous in terms of the protagonist. I mean, you want to hear noir on the radio? We've got Pat Novak for Hire coming up. First episode on the 27th. That was noir. This was just this was kind of a detective show. Now, as you listen to this, you get a feeling, obviously, that you're missing some things, and that this is a little bit, shall we say, rushed. The reason? Because it is. The length of the original movie was 111 minutes. The length of this episode, 23 minutes and 19 seconds. Now, if I opt to cut commercials out of an episode, I get some grief from some people. This is how it was downloaded off of archive.org, so that's how it came to me. So you got 23 minutes and 19 seconds to tell the story. Overall, they did a pretty good job, even though you could tell some stuff was missing. You picked up some of the finest parts of the acting, and you had to leave some details on the cutting room floor. A lot of details. It reminded me of if you've ever watched improv. There's a improv game that some troops will play called Half-Life. Well, they'll start a scene, and they'll do a minute and a half scene. They'll cut it down to 45. They'll cut it down to 22. And they'll cut it down then further to 11. This was pretty close to a minute and 30-second scene cut down to 22 and a half seconds. And they managed to make it make sense. And the big thing, too. And you can listen to the episode and you can go, well, you know, there was this and that wrong, but it's Jimmy Stewart. You get to listen to Jimmy Stewart on the radio, so you just like it because Jimmy Stewart's in it. Jimmy Stewart, amazing charisma. Probably best on-stage charisma of any actor I can ever see. You turn on, whether anytime it's a movie or anything with Jimmy Stewart, and you automatically like the character. Now, whether that's because of our general association with some of Jimmy Stewart's characters, like George Bailey and Jefferson Smith, and we just associate everything else. I don't know. I think it's just his natural stage presence. And it really does. It adds something here, even with the challenges of doing a show this short. It's because of how little time they had in this that I'm a bigger fan of doing Lux Radio, or something a bit longer, because then you get to really enjoy a little more, and it's not quite so rushed when you have 44 to 50 minutes. But this was the best we had for Call Northside 77 with the original cast in it. So, all right, well, we're going to wrap this episode up. We're going to be tracking some of the stats, see who downloads this. Special thanks go out to Johnny Tusa for providing the opening theme music for this week's episode of The Great Detectives of Old Time Radio. If you'd like to hear more of Johnny's music, please visit music.greatdetectives.net. That's music.greatdetectives.net. Feel free to check out our site under constant development. It's greatdetectives.net. Got any comments? Feel free to email me, box13@greatdetectives.net. From Boise, Idaho, this is your host, Adam Graham, signing off.